Welcome to the Diverse Recruiting Continuity, Building a Diverse and Inclusive Workforce Virtually. I'm Cody Horton, your host. I've been the founder and managing director for Diverse Recruiting Experts and spent the last couple of decades working in recruiting on strategy and working with virtual teams, and thought we'd share a little bit of information today that'll help you move forward with your diversity recruiting efforts, especially in this time where you've got so many people who are on distributed teams and working remotely and virtual. I did want to share this quote with you from Andrew Carnegie. It says, "Teamwork is the ability to work together toward a common vision, the ability to direct individual accomplishments toward the organizational objectives. It's the fuel that allows common people to attain uncommon results." And we're certainly seeing that this is a relevant quote today as we move forward with all the challenges that we're having. Today, what I'm hoping to cover with you and share, talking a little bit about the benefits of having a remote workforce. Some of you are experiencing that now. Also going to talk a little bit about the challenges of that remote workforce. Want to share some things that can help you as you align your talent goals to your business needs, and even talk a little bit about how you might have to revisit the values and competencies that you hire to and that you measure your performance with your teams to. I want to have you take a little time and think about how you visualize the workplace that you want to see. And one of the keys is your ability to expand your geographic reach and reach more talent and broaden your diversity perspective as you move forward in this new normal. Also going to share some things around how you use a digital workforce and how you can foster a digital workplace. And then I want to talk about remote training, or remote hiring, and leadership decision-making when you're not face-to-face. I also want to encourage you, if you have questions, put those in the Q&A section. We're going to address those questions as we go through, and then we'll also have a question and answer period at the end. So what are some of the benefits and challenges of having a diverse workforce? Right now, most of us are living this. Some of the benefits are the reduced need for costly office space. It's also a huge benefit is just the amount of time that people aren't spending on a subway or on a train or in a car commuting to and from the office. If you do the math and you add up all the time that you spend traveling back and forth to work, it's amazing what you'll see if you just do that by week. There's also a benefit of working remotely. People are seeing increase in productivity, and they're seeing the ability to make the work that they're doing be more impactful and count more. You also have the opportunity for a better work-life integration, and you are able to reach that broader talent pool that you might not have been able to reach had you have everyone come into the office or relocate or just be on site face-to-face. There are challenges associated with this, and a number of people, I've talked to people that are experiencing this. One of the big challenges that face companies is, how do you maintain the current culture that you have by having a virtual workforce? How do you build a community and make sure that people are able to work together face-to-face in that face-to-face collaboration? There are challenges with time zones. If you've got a multinational global company, or you've got a company that crosses multiple time zones, there are challenges with that. There's also then this is probably one of the biggest ones for the individual, is how do they engage with their peers, and how do you stop feeling like you're isolated and by yourself? There are also the distractions that you might have if you have a home office and you weren't set up for doing remote work. And then there's the piece, and this is the key to teams, is how do you build trust with your teammates and with other people? So we're going to share a little bit of information that maybe will allow you to take away one or two tips, and certainly look forward to your questions. So one of the big things that you want to take into consideration from the business perspective and your team perspective is making sure you're aligning your talent goals to the business goals. Every company is going to think about the specific goals that they have, but here are some things that you might consider. Making sure that those are clear goals and that those goals are communicated across the organization so that everyone understands those goals. Make sure you've set measurable outcomes. I mean, people talk about SMART goals. It's more important now to ensure that those goals are clear. People understand how they're measured. You want to know what's the impact that you want to have with each goal. Maybe it shouldn't be a goal just because it's always been a goal. The other thing is having collaboration goals and setting up those goals that how do people work together? How do they get things done? It's because the need for team engagement is so much more critical than it might be if you could walk down the hall and be face to face with your colleagues. Communication goals, set frequency of communication. What's the cadence going to look like? What channels are you going to use for communication? Can you over communicate and saturate your team with too much email or too many other tools? And then making sure that those goals align with what the business is trying to accomplish. This is probably one of the biggest, is the need to revisit what are your values and the competencies that you're measuring people on and you're hiring teams for. Some of the things that you'll want to revisit are, what are your core values, right? What are you actually looking for in that, or in that employee? What's the culture look like, and what will the culture look like in the future if you have a blended workforce where some people are remote, some people are on site? How do you get stuff done? There are certain ways when we're working face to face that we get things done, and that has to shift a little bit in this virtual environment. And how do you ensure that there's teamwork? When you reset the values, what are you looking for to make sure that the people you're hiring and the people who are working for you understand what teamwork looks like? And then there's certainly a number of competencies that we all hire for in our companies. Are those the same? Will they stay the same? And then what behaviors are you looking for with this virtual workforce? What does good look like? You want to be able to understand what that looks like. You want to make sure your leadership team understands it. And you want to make sure everyone on the team understands what good looks like. So one of the best ways to go about this is an exercise in just visualizing the workplace that you want to see and thinking about, what is it about our workplace that needs to change? And a lot of times these are things that are related to face-to-face engagement. What you really need to look at is changing in the culture will start with your executive leadership team, and it starts at the top, and other people align to what the leaders are doing and what the leaders say is critical and important. You want to make sure that it's a people-centric, people-focused organization. The tendency is to look for the technology and the tools and focus on all the kind of nice to haves and the bells and whistles. But at the end of the day, running a business is about the people that you have and having those people be inspired and comfortable and feel like they belong to your organization. And that is a critical component of having this virtual workforce and even a face-to-face on-site workforce. And then think about who you want to hire. You certainly know who you've hired today and the behaviors that they have, but also visualize the people that you want to hire so that you move forward in this new scenario and this new normal. And then look at, how does the team focus need to be? What can your team do? What are you looking for in a team player? One of the big ones is being able to foster inclusion. I mentioned that you could reach a broader team of people and a broader candidate pool, but make sure that when those people come to work for you, they feel included and they feel like they belong in the organization. And that takes some thinking and some visualizing. The other thing that you might want to visualize is, how do you help your team learn? Do you have active learners in the company who are going to do the research, who are going to think, who are going to ask questions? Do you have people who are great communicators? It's so critical with this virtual workforce that communication be clear and received. You got to have listeners. You have to have people who are putting information out. And so work on getting the right communication cadence and the right people in your organization. And are you looking for people that have a higher level of problem-solving skills? Or do you currently have and currently hire people who need a lot more guidance? And this could be at all levels in your organization. And then the other thing that you might consider as you visualize this is, how proactive do the people need to be? Do they need to be self-motivated? Do they need to have some drive? Those are the things that you want to think about. This is certainly not an exhaustive list, so you'll have to think about the workplace you want to see, but these are just a few things that you might consider as you're thinking about this. So I talked about being able to reach more people. You want to be able to expand your geographic reach with the virtual workforce. Some of the barriers that having a virtual workforce and a distributed team will fix, it's the distance, right? Does this person have to drive into the office every day? It's the location. What cities are people located in that you might have access to now that you didn't have access to previously? And then the countries. If you're a global organization, or maybe you're not a global organization, but you want to take advantage of the global workforce and the talent pool, is this removes the barrier for reaching out to people in other countries. But just if you're just US based, this opens the doors for you to reach a lot more talent. This increases your ability to access people in a variety of locations, remote locations, metropolitan areas, rural areas. This gives you the opportunity to reach talent and hire talent that you might not have otherwise been able to hire. You're also able to connect with more diverse talent. One of the big challenges with hiring for diversity is people are typically pooled in a specific region of the country. You can access that population now and take advantage of the remote and the virtual aspects of this. One of the tools that you can use is certainly video interviews, virtual career fairs. I did a webinar a few weeks ago on video interviews and virtual hiring. And so you may want to take a look at that on our YouTube channel. And if you don't have access to that, send me a note and I'll definitely get you the link to it. The other thing, if you're following the science, you can reduce your carbon footprint because everyone is not flying everywhere. They're not driving everywhere. There are calculators that will help you see the impact of reducing that carbon footprint by reducing that travel or building new buildings. And then the others is you can reach candidates everywhere. We talked a little bit about this, but this is a huge advantage to having a virtual or remote workforce. So broadening your diversity perspective, a lot of times we look at diversity at race, ethnicity, gender, generational differences. I mean, we have multiple generations in the workforce now. But this gives you the opportunity to reach more talent. You can reach people who have visual impairments, hearing impairments, mobility impairments, people with orientations that are different than yours. There's a huge pool of talent that's now available to you. It's really all the talent that's available because you don't physically have to move them to a location. And there are lots of different jobs out there. Not every industry lends itself to a virtual workforce, but the industries that do can definitely take advantage of this remote workforce and being able to broaden that diversity perspective because you've got greater access to the talent. You'll also get the opportunity to build your brand, and because everyone's online, so you've got the screen time, so you could share the great things you're doing with your company. I know we have a number of people on this webinar who have companies that are doing things to enhance their brand by being more inclusive and embracing this remote workforce or telework or whatever term your company uses. This is a phenomenal opportunity. And then one of the big things about broadening your perspective is think about your workforce in the context of the employee or the candidate and personalize their experience. There's been no greater time than now to personalize the experience, especially the online experience with potential employees, current employees, and even potential customers. So you can definitely spend time and focus on personalizing that experience. One of the other things that you want to do is take advantage of the ability to understand some of the cultural considerations and the differences that exist, certainly with all the different demographics, but just in the regions that your team or your workforce will be working in. Jeff, I want to stop just a second before I move into talent evaluation and just see if there's anybody that has a question that I need to answer.
Yeah, I have two questions for you. So Brooke asks, how often do you suggest meeting with your entire team to check in?
Brooke, that's a great question. It's certainly going to depend on the company. I would say when you start out, it's important to more frequently connect with your team. So there may be a daily check-in. It doesn't have to be long. And the check-in would be not around doing all the work-related stuff, but it's just to get to know people. It's just to make sure everyone gets comfortable with being virtual and being in this, not face-to-face environment. That gives you the opportunity to hear and listen more as the leader. And one of the things that's important is listening to what your employees are saying and understanding how do they want to be communicated with and what's the cadence and the frequency. You can reduce that daily connection as you move forward and as you learn how your team interacts. But that's one of the things. I would start out doing it daily, and it could be half an hour, or it could be even shorter than that. And it could be as a full team, or it could be individual check-ins. That's one of the things that would help. So.
Second question from Janice is, how do you turn off work so your home feels like a home and not an office when your day is over?
Yeah, that is probably the most challenging thing for the individual, is being able to turn it off. I talked a little bit about having that work-life balance or the work-life integration. Because you're working from home and that computer is always there, the tendency is to jump on that computer consistently. My advice is that you close the computer down, you close the lid, you turn off the monitors, and you just have to make sure that you manage the boundaries and you hold your leadership accountable for managing those boundaries, because the tendency is for people to always be connected and always reach out. And this is part of a leadership challenge, is leaders have to get good at respecting times and boundaries and time zones, and not always expecting real-time responses, especially if it's outside the working hours. So that's going to be a little bit of a challenge. It's one that you have to just be disciplined and work through. And eventually people get the understanding that, okay, I'm not working 24/7. But one of the reasons productivity increases is because people are spending more time working, and you don't want to see the burnout factor happen, which happens pretty frequently for people who are especially new to working remotely or working from home. So great question.
That's what I've got for now.
Perfect. So I want to talk a little bit about the talent evaluation capability. Working remotely requires everyone to get better at evaluating talent and understanding what needs to be, and being a little bit more disciplined. Here are just a few things. I did a full webinar on this, but some of the things you want to do when you're interviewing candidates is get better at recording those interviews, whether it's a phone interview or it's a video interview. You want to be able to record that so that everyone on the team has an opportunity to hear exactly what the candidate does. We do this regularly with our candidates so that everyone can hear what the candidate said. The other thing is train interviewers. A lot of times people have been interviewing for a long time. They have the benefit of face-to-face interviews and the ability to kind of see body language. What happens when you're remote is you don't have that input, and your interviewers need to be trained on do's and don'ts and how to conduct a good interview. Sometimes people who've done interviews for a long time tend to ask that question that they've always asked, and face-to-face it may be different, but when you're doing it virtually, you really want to make sure that they understand what they're doing. Use those experienced interviewers and ensure that the interviewers, it's really critical for the interviewers to know the role that they're interviewing for. Read the job description, better understand what you're looking for, prioritize the must-haves and what you're looking for, and use diverse sets of interviewers so that you're going to get a different perspective from different interviewers. Case in point is I've worked with a company, and the interviewers had all similar backgrounds. There was some bias in that process because the candidates that looked like them and sounded like them or went to the schools that they liked, those candidates tended to do better than the candidates who came from different backgrounds. And so you want to make sure that you're looking at the bias that could possibly be in the interview. The other thing about assessing during this interview process is there's a bias. So the last person you talk to might be the most interesting person because you forgot, time has passed, and you forgot about the people who were first in the interview. And so you have to be disciplined about that and go back and review those recorded interviews or review those notes that you've had and really understand what each candidate is bringing to the table. The other thing that interviewers need to get better at is just probing candidates when they get an answer from a candidate that they don't relate to or they don't understand. Instead of writing the candidate off and just moving on, you have to get better at just probing that candidate to seek more understanding. And if your team is using assessments or tests or skill tests, make sure that you're using ones that are validated tests so that you're not introducing a bias into that process that may disqualify a candidate because the assessment itself was not validated for bias. So there's the interview piece, and you can take a look at the webinar that I did on virtual interviews. And then there's the making hiring decisions. This is the part that's new to most of us. Being able to make those hiring decisions without ever seeing the person face to face in person is a challenge, and there's risk involved. But the risk is no greater than not seeing the person face to face. Unless you need someone to demonstrate an actual physical activity in the interview, you're going to get a lot of value out of just talking to the candidate, seeing them on video, hearing their interview, and asking them questions and doing the probing. Hire for values, not culture fit. So all those values that you're reevaluating are critical, and they're probably the most critical thing because you want to hire for what you value in the company and see if those candidates actually match the values that you're trying to hire for versus the culture fit. Here's an example. If your company is used to face-to-face and you never have a remote employee, and the company is used to having after hours events, you know, softball games, bowling parties, happy hours, all the things that go with building relationships and creating a culture. If you're interviewing someone and they don't do all those things, you're just hiring them for culture fit, how you feel about them. Does your instinct tell you that this is someone you could work with because you like them? You want to look at those values in more of a pure sense of what are the values that you're looking for. You want to consider the must-haves. This is probably the hardest bullet on this slide. Considering the must-haves, not the nice-to-haves, is very difficult. I just got through talking with a person about this, and they had a pool of candidates who were all equally qualified when it comes to the skill set that they were looking for. The difference is on the nice to haves, there were a couple of candidates who had more of the nice to haves than they did the must haves. So companies want to hire, get the most bang for the buck, especially in this environment where you're dealing with cost and you want to get the best employee that you could possibly get to do all the things that you could ever imagine that they would do, versus hiring for the must-haves for that job and the basic qualifications for that job. My recommendation is that you not ignore the nice-to-haves, but you put those at a lower priority than you do the must-haves. Because if you're trying to diversify your workforce, a lot of times the candidates that you're going to have in the pool that are highly qualified and can meet the must-haves and have the potential for the nice-to-haves may not have done all the nice-to-haves because they haven't been in this industry for that long. Tech is an example of that, because typically you're going to have people who have been in technology. They know lots of different technologies. They know lots of different programming languages, and they are going to be a better candidate when you consider all the nice-to-haves. And a lot of times when it goes off the rails and you are hiring for talent, the challenge is going to become, and if you're in a debrief, the debrief is going to be around most of the nice to haves, where you're going to say, this is a better candidate because they have all these nice to haves. But I would say, take the time, prioritize the must haves, and work on the must haves. I use a model for complex decision making. It's called AHP, which is the analytical hierarchy process, it allows you to really determine, are the priorities that you set, are those the preferred priorities? And you'll get a number out, it'll check for consistency. I'm happy to share information on that with anybody who's interested in hearing that. The other thing you want to do is, with your interview teams and with your leadership team, agree on what the competencies need to be for a role. Is it, for example, this person should have a competency of really driving and trying to deliver results? Is it something where communication and collaboration is a top priority? You want to get agreement from the leadership team on what it takes to be in the company and what competencies you're looking for. And then I talked about prioritizing the role requirements. Make sure you know what's most critical for that role. And then get good at conflict resolution. When you're in a debrief for a candidate, there's going to be disagreement typically. You want to get good at working through those and solving through that. And it might not be a unanimous decision, but you've heard everyone, you've heard what they have to say, you've seen their concerns, you've addressed the concerns, and then you've decided to move forward as an organization. A couple of things you want to be able to assess for is creativity and empathy. Those are two areas where you're not going to be able to create a technical solution for that. Some of these other things, you can create a technical solution for a problem that you have. On the creative side, you're not going to be able to do that. And you want to get good at evaluating, assessing, and understanding what that looks like, if that's something that's important to your workforce. And if you've got a distributed, remote team, having the ability to have empathy for each other and be creative with problem solving is going to be important as you move forward. And you always want to debrief with the interview team. As many people from that interview as you can have in the debrief, you want to make sure everybody has a chance to weigh in, share their concerns, share their feedback, share the positive things that they got from the candidate, and really evaluate whether that's a great candidate, so you feel better, you have a better sense of what you're really looking for. And this one, sometimes this is hard because I'm a hiring manager myself, and I tend to violate this, is just hiring managers should weigh in last. Whoever the person is that's hiring that person, they're going to spend the most time with that new hire. You want them to weigh in last to hear everyone's feedback and not tip the scale, so that other people who are part of the interview process, who may actually work for this hiring manager, feel more comfortable about sharing what they need. Now, some companies, it's not a problem. Other companies, it's more hierarchical, and that hiring manager's opinion could really sway the way people think. So any questions any questions, Jeff?
Yeah, I've got one for you from Fran. How do you avoid exclusion when promoting inclusion? For example, fun events around children, sports, pets at the office. You can opt out of attending those events possibly, but then you're called out on group meeting or in chat.
Yeah, avoiding this gets back to that whole inclusion focus, right? And looking at what's important and looking at the values. In some companies, it's critical that you attend all the social events, and not everyone has the ability to do that because of their work-life situation. And this is where that whole focus on diversity and creating an environment where people can actually be who they are, and meet the values and still be a good performer and still be a valued member of the team. This one takes work, right? You've got to, as a leadership team, check yourself and understand that this person is getting their work done. They are participating in the moment. So you could set things like water cooler opportunities where those check-ins and those just gatherings are during the work hours. They're something that people can participate in, and they can build relationships, not only with the broader team, but one-on-one with each other. And that gives them the opportunity to actually be a valued member and feel like they belong to the organization and feel like they are a match with the organization. That takes work, it takes discipline. It also takes holding each other accountable and calling each other out. And it also means the individual should raise that issue with the leadership if they see that, hey, this seems like it's an issue because I'm a single parent. I have to be home for my children at a certain time. And I just feel like I'm not being included because I can't attend all of the events. Having a virtual team makes a difference because you've leveled the playing field by having everyone be virtual and do the virtual get together or online virtual game or, virtual happy hour, whatever your company decides to do to have those water cooler moments, or there's just the hangout time, that will make a difference. All right, so let me talk a little. Go ahead, Jeff.
Brooke is asking, if I keep my team virtual, how do I gauge productivity?
Yeah, great question. This also gets to do I trust my team if I don't see them, right? If my team is working remotely, how do I know they're doing their job and not just hanging out? And this gets back to the work-life integration question point that I made earlier. If you have a virtual workforce, one of the practices is to have a certain number of hours during the day where everyone on the team is available. The other time during the day should be focused on people getting their work done and being productive. So some ways you can handle that. One is to make sure that you have good goals in place and deliverables, right? And when I talked about setting goals where you're measuring the impact of the work that they're doing, and ideally there's some data that can go with that, so you have numbers that you can look at to see what the production looks like. Then you can look at the impact, and you can also determine, hey, is this person communicating and collaborating with other people? And you can get feedback on specific projects, especially if it's a project. So the key is to have goals, make sure everyone understands what those goals are, and make sure that you are communicating the output and the results. And it's okay to publish that and keep it transparent so that everyone sees the output. And when you see that there's a challenge or an issue with someone's productivity, you just talk to them and you communicate. You have to over communicate without saturating your team, and you can communicate during a number of ways. So
that's what I got for now.
So I talked about leveling the playing field. One of the things you want to do is make sure you're fostering a digital workplace. And some of the things, this is not all inclusive, but I've got a lot of bullet points on this slide because I think it's important to be able to make this adjustment. You want to design your workforce for digital engagement, meaning people can work electronically and it's not required for them to physically be somewhere doing something unless they're touching a product that has to touch another piece of equipment or machine. Most of these companies that are in the knowledge space or consulting can do this remotely. Having that digital workplace allows you to communicate in a very rich way. The other thing you want to do is, in order to foster this digital workplace, you have to make sure all roads to career growth and career development don't lead to the corporate headquarters. So if your corporate headquarters is in a specific location, but you're hiring people all over the country, but they're limited on how much they can grow in the company and what their career opportunity looks like, you want to be able to think about, how can we change this so that people can work anywhere and be successful in this company and have a longer career? You also want to look at what's the difference between your office and your office workers and your remote workers. The goal is to level the playing field so that even if you only have one remote worker, you've put in place video, email, chat, internal collaboration tools using other products that like Microsoft Teams, Slack, Google Hangouts. There are lots of tools that you could use to make sure that you've leveled the playing field. And you always want to make sure that the people who are remote have access, the ability to communicate in the same way that someone who's in the office does. And so whether you have 100 or 10,000 remote workers or one, you want to make sure that you are focused and leveling the playing field with that remote workforce. One of the things that is not having assigned desk. Some of the big companies, these are major corporations who've gone to not having an assigned desk. They let people come in and do what they call hotel, or you can reserve a desk when it's needed and you're going to be face to face, but you don't have your own desk. Your own desk is back in your home office. You also want to be able to leverage the technology. You don't want to overemphasize the technology because it should be all about the people, but the technology just provides the infrastructure for you to do a better job in a digital workplace. So using video gives the opportunity to build relationships. Using audio, that's another helpful way. Using AI and machine learning and data analytics tools that allow you to tell a story and to be able to share more information across multiple channels and platforms with your organization. And then you want to be able to use stuff that allows you to automate translations. So if you've got a global workforce and you want to be able to take translations from a specific language into another language, using some of those automation tools allows you to do the translation. The other thing is transcription tools that could take a meeting and take the audio and transcribe that into text that allows you to share that in another format for people to be able to consume. I talked about personalizing the experience for your employees and your customers and your candidates. You want to be able to get to know people who work for you and not just know them because you're talking about work all the time. Just get some of that personal time that you would if you were walking down to someone's desk and having a conversation around that. Real-time communication, it's much easier to have real-time communication through all the various channels that exist. Email is not real-time communication, although many of us treat it like real-time communication, but chat allows you to interact or just pick up the phone or jump on video to allow you to have that real live conversation. So it's no different than you would if you were going into the office, you could have that real-time conversation. The other thing is make sure that your workforce has a setup that allows them to have the equipment, the tools, the configurations that they need to be able to work remotely. Video conferencing, I talked about text, chat, recording tools. You can record demos. If you're trying to tell someone how to do something, instead of typing out a full page email, just use one of the tools to record a screen capture and send that to the team, because then that's shareable and it's not this one-time thing that they've got to just read. And then you want to be able to find other companies who are doing digital work. If you can find digital partners that you can share best practices with, or digital partners that enhance your ability to deliver on your core offerings, that is a key. There are companies out there that specialize in helping enable companies to be more digitally savvy. And then just building that workforce for digital is really critical. So one of the things that is so key, and the leaders and the managers and individual contributors are going to play a role in, is developing that leadership expertise for remote. This slide has a lot of information on it, so I'm going to hit on a few of these, but you want to be able to develop your leadership capability. The best way to find out if you're a good leader and a good manager is to get a remote team. Because when you're face to face, you could be a little bit more sloppy with being a leader and not be as good, because the communication that you have to do is so different when you can just walk down the hall and quickly talk to someone about an issue. If you're remote, you've got to be able to communicate. You've got to be deliberate about scheduling the check-ins, and you've got to be in a position that you're listening, and you're listening not to the person that's talking to you face to face, but you've got to listen through some of the channels that you're using for communication. You're going to need to get to know every teammate individually and understand how does your team interact. So that requires much more attention. Doing daily check-ins are things that you can do to make this better. Setting expectations and making sure the expectations are clear. If you get to the end, usually a manager will get to the end when performance review time comes, and the employee will say, well, I didn't know you wanted that. As a remote leader, it's paramount that you set expectations so people know what is expected of them. And you can do that, I think, much easier because you've got to communicate in a written format or in a video format and in some way that it's documented. And you want to be able to share information regularly as a leader, as a remote leader. This is going to help you get better. And being able to encourage teams during challenges. Now is a perfect time for a leader to just check in with their teams to see how people are doing and make sure that, and you're listening for things that might be a concern. Give and solicit feedback to and from your teams on a regular basis. And I talked about this a little earlier, is set hours where all the teams there. If you've got a globally distributed team and some people are going to be working at midnight and some people are going to be working at 6 a.m., you want to find a balance in there where you can have a normal time, a window of time where everyone's on, so everybody gets the same message. And then the other times can be adjusted and you can flex on those. I talked about having social meeting points where you're just hanging out, you're learning, you're talking to each other, you're building those relationships. Some of the things you might do is have a virtual office party. Our team's 100% virtual, so we do this. We've been doing this and we're built from the ground up to be a virtual team. And we have parties, we play games, we do all kinds of things, and it feels like a normal office. You want to be able to make sure that your team understands how their work fits into the vision and mission of the company. Align those goals, make sure people get that communication, and reward people and make sure you catch people doing things that are contributing to the mission and to the vision of the company. And the biggest thing you could do is just model the behavior you want to see. So don't send emails at times when you know your team is asleep. Use that delayed send method, or just wait and send it at another time, or set the expectation that no response is required. So just modeling that behavior, taking time off, you know, to the question that was asked earlier, one of the things you can do to manage that work-life balance, or to keep people from feeling like they're left out because they didn't make it to an event, is, you know, don't work all the time, or let the team know, hey, I can't make it to this event because I've got a personal obligation, and people will understand it and they'll see you as human, and they'll see the behavior, and then they'll duplicate that. Help your teams build trust. I talked about this digital water cooler scenario where people are just hanging out, and encourage your team to do this with each other. It doesn't have to be the leader always recommending this. It's just things that the team can do themselves. I talked about holding each other accountable and sharing information and giving that feedback almost real time if you can. And then empower your team to take breaks and actually live their lives away from work. So that if you've got a doctor's appointment or you've got something else to do, then make sure that your team understands it's okay to go and do those things. So as the leader, these are a few things that you can do to get better and to improve and to foster that workforce. So Jeff, that's all I had that I wanted to share.
I got a couple questions for you. So Janice asked, how do you balance communication so that you're not saturating your people with different communication tools or negatively impacting production?
Yeah, that's a challenge, because now that you are remote, there's so many different channels of communication. There's email, there's chat, there's pinging people on things, they're making phone calls and leaving messages. The key is to, you know, set some delays on the email going out, or just discipline yourself. Make a note that you could send a message out. You want to be able to prioritize the information that you're sending. So some information is going to be urgent and needs to be handled right away. And so those are things that you want to respond and send that out through the most urgent means of communication. Other things are just FYI and updates. And FYI and updates can wait. You can manage those, right? If you've got, oh, I got this great article, I want to send it. But if you've already sent your team 100 other messages during the day, you might just hold it and put it on the send later. So it's working on a balance of deciding, hey, what should go out now? And this may take some thought on your part as the leadership team, or you talk to your team about it and listen to what they say. And they might prefer to get email that's, descriptive and has other things, and they may want to keep other communication to come through chat, or they might want something to come through a demo, or it could be a one-on-one. It could be an all hands meeting, an all team meeting that you share. So you have to categorize the information and when you're going to send it out, and be mindful of that. The other responsibility lies with the employee receiving information. It's okay to say, hey, I have a hard time managing through all the email that I get. Would it be possible for you to flag this message as urgent, action required? You can put tags in your email that say, this is urgent, action required, or FYI. And so I think you get better at knowing how to categorize the email, and then you have to work on the discipline of knowing, okay, I shouldn't send this right now. And so the other thing is reply all, right? If someone is not very good at managing their email, then you don't want to reply all to that person. And you may just want to reply to the person that exists. Or if someone sends you an email, and I'm picking on email because I'm the biggest violator of email, is you may not want to respond to everything with, oh, thank you, right? You could set an expectation with the team that, hey, if you're just going to reply, thank you, or I got it, then don't send that message, because you're just adding to the email. You can also set up rules in the email, but I think the best thing to do is as a team decide what the categories look like and what the best channel for that communication should be.
Next question. Will remote teams continue to be a priority, or will it go back to how it was, or what we think is normal?
Yeah, that's the 800-pound gorilla in the room. From my perspective, what needs to happen is companies need to lean into remote teams and lean into telework and lead into virtual teams and make it more productive, make the environment more digitally friendly, because we've got a generation coming up that is they call them digital natives. They've done digital work their entire life. And so my opinion is remote teams should continue to grow because of all the benefits that we looked at. What the reality is going to be, I think it's going to be a mix. Some companies are going to embrace this remote effort. They're going to cut costs from building big buildings, because companies that are growing are running out of space, and they're trying to decide, where do we build our next office, versus being able to say, we're going to build a virtual team and allow those workers to work remotely. I think some companies are going to try to go back to the way it was. In my opinion, what's going to happen though is employees who have adjusted to working remotely and having the ability to have work-life balance and work-life integration are going to be resistant to going back into the office and commuting 30 minutes or 2 hours a day. If you just do the math, you're going to see how much that doesn't make sense to go back and forth for 2 hours when you could do the same job remotely. And so I think that it's going to be mixed, but I think most companies are probably going to lean toward some blended kind of workforce where some people are remote, some people are in office, and they're big companies that are doing this. Companies are building tools and platforms that allow them to create a more diverse virtual workforce. And they've been working on it for years and years and years. Two of my former employers have a very distributed workforce, and they are massive organizations, and they're continuing to build products and build processes and find ways to change their culture so that you can have that remote virtual workforce.
Next question. Brooke asks, how long has Diverse Recruiting Experts been a virtual company?
Since day one, I've been a champion of remote work for probably the last 15 years. My business partner has managed virtual teams through companies and bought and sold companies. So we built our company to be a virtual team from the ground up. We also built our company to be diverse and inclusive from the ground up. And so our core values lean toward remote and diversity and inclusion and belonging and equity. And that's, that's just because that's a personal belief of our leadership team, and we'll continue to embrace and lean into virtual and remote work.
3 years is the exact answer.
The exact answer is 3 years.
Any other questions? Otherwise, that's what we've got for today.
Great. Well, I want to thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, send me an email, drop a note. We'll make sure that we get this content out there. We'll break it up so that you can actually select the areas that you want to select. And I really appreciate you joining us. Take care and have a great day.